We're back with another discussion about the world around us. We're reverse redacting. We're going back. We're uncovering things that have been perhaps hidden from discovery, or just going back and looking at things. I'm here. My name is Judah, and I'm here with Ford. Ford, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Yeah, good. It's new year. It's
Yeah,
2018.
Right. Yeah. Now, it being a new year, you were talking to me earlier about having some goals as far as websites go, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I've dipping my toe into the dense ocean, vast ocean of the web for the first time in a while. I tried starting a website prior years before, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, and yeah, I just kind of bumped my head into walls and installed WordPress and didn't really know what I was doing, but got some viruses on my site. Did the thing. So now I'm going to try again. I'm trying to start from scratch, learn some HTML, some CSS, and a dabbling of JavaScript, maybe, with the intent of creating a design for website that may not be like Apple quality or user not having the UI necessarily or the design savvy, but just making something that is usable for people like me that are looking for different ways to tell story. I guess that's where my heart always comes back to, is storytelling.
Okay.
And I just feel like the web is an unmined resource for story that we've all been distracted, or we're kind of like bugs around, a light bulb. We just kind of all come to these nodes, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, places where there are people that are already congregating, and instead of trying to start our own little things. And so I want to see what can happen when I start my own little thing, my own little place to tell stories. So that's what I'm kind of trying to think of the web as: storytelling medium, not just as storytelling distributing platform. And I think it's underutilized as the distributing platform as well, because again, we go to these existing nodes instead of using what, the internet is really supposed to be a peer-to-peer service. And we're still kind of thinking of it as a, importing old ideas of the, Hollywood studio system and theaters, so YouTube is the theater, and Netflix is the Hollywood studio system and theater. So we're still thinking of things through this old way of doing things, when the purpose of the internet is to say, you don't have to go to an agent to submit your screenplay. Just put your screenplay directly to, a web page and let people read it. And if it's good, hey, let's make this movie. Why in the world are we even having a middleman in this equation? So like, maybe you don't have great taste. Who cares? There's all kinds of bad action movies from the 80s people love to watch that like, just make it. Some people wouldn't even have, it's amazing, some people even have a career in the existing system, so, and there's so many screenplays that just sit dead on a shelf somewhere because nobody was willing to take a risk on it. And they actually paid money for it, though. They paid money, 20 grand for a screenplay that's sitting on a shelf, and they don't want anybody to see it because they're afraid that it won't make money and make them look bad, or that somebody else will buy it and make a movie that makes money and will make them look bad too. So there's this weird catch-22 with the old way of telling visual stories. And I think the internet, we have still kept that mentality when we've migrated to the internet.
Well, that's a lot. That's interesting. Well, I guess, what was your very first experience of the internet? What was, because I remember back in 1996, I was 16, and I remember, like, my friend his dad was, really tech savvy, and he got the internet, and he could not believe it. Like, he could look up celebrities and stuff, and he could print things out off of somebody else's, somebody else put up there. And I at first I was incredulous. I was like, I thought of it like a word processing program or something,
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I could kind of, like you can put pictures on a, but for the most part, the internet was pretty useless to me until college.
Right.
And of course, me and you, we entered college at a time when, I mean, it was a pretty, like, I try to explain it to people I work with, people like anybody below the age of like 27 doesn't understand how amazing it was for all of us who joined, about the turn of the century, 1999, 2000, when we went to school. There was like an influx. Most schools had cable internet,
right.
And we're just getting it about then, the cable
Right.
internet. And
you actually had speed.
you had speed.
56K, yeah.
And then you had Napster.
Yeah, Napster was the game changer.
It was a game changer.
Yep.
But when you think about it, Napster's not, I mean, I was going back and looking at, you don't think of Napster as a website, right? You think of it as a content delivery system.
Right, exactly. And I think one of the problems with when we think of the internet, we have been so conditioned by the main hubs of the internet to kind of, it's taken on a new meaning in our mind. And the internet has evolved over the years. Like early on, there was a lot of these, message boards, forums. Think of GeoCities and things that I never really, like, I was too late to the party for a lot of that because I wasn't really tech savvy and we didn't really have a good internet connection at my house. I accessed the internet from school. So,
right.
And it was mainly for, okay, you could see videos, but that was before YouTube. So it was like, you could see trailers on the internet, and it was baby steps for me. It was more of a research tool. Memes were starting to come out, but I wasn't really savvy enough to really understand all that stuff. And we got to college, and yeah, I mean, you had super fast internet for what the time, and the kind of data that was being exchanged. It was very fast.
Yeah.
And then when I would go home for summers, it was AOL. I mean, that's what I think of when I think of the internet. We had AOL because we were all tech illiterate at the time, and
right.
AOL was this net neutrality violating portal, basically this hub, to get on the internet, and it eventually kind of created its own demise, because at a certain point, people became tech savvy enough to realize, oh, I don't need AOL in order to get on the internet. Like, right. I can actually do my own thing. And I think a lot of what a lot of businesses over time, they have actually ended up being pretty good services to teach people, to get their foot wet and get a little deeper in and a little deeper in, and to realize, oh, I can actually stand up on my own 2 feet here, And so I think we are in this time now where the heavy hitters of the internet, we have given them way too much power because it's just been convenient, and it's power that we can really take back and discover a new web and kind of get back to the whole point of what the internet was. And that's, I was thinking about today, so I'm learning very rudimentary Python. And so when, they're talking about how a variable can equal a number or can equal a string. And he was saying, basically that equal sign is not really equals in the mathematical sense. It means it takes the value of something. And just even to use Python, you install, or you change a global variable for your computer that when you type in Python into the command, it will execute that directory, right? It'll find that directory. So when you type in Python, it's going to automatically find it in that directory. And so, like, even just thinking about those two things, like variables having a certain value of something and changing a global variable on your computer, this is super rudimentary stuff for anybody who was ever in computing back in the 80s or 90s. But like that is what we do with the internet. Like a hyperlink is a variable, you know, that contains information that when you access that, you click on that and it brings up this whole new universe of information contained in that one little link or in that one little word. And, you know, you think about that aspect of computing is it opens up all kinds of possibilities, all kinds of new gateways. And really that's what the internet's supposed to be. It's supposed to be this, I am a gateway to a certain bit of information. You are a gateway to a certain bit of other information. We're all gateways instead of centralized gateways, you know, that you require enormous amounts of capital, that require an office building, that require backing or grants or subsidy or corporate sponsorship. Like we can actually be gateways without any of those things. Like we don't have to be subsidized, you know? And so that's this, our little variables, our little hyperlinks can actually have value to one another, that we can actually meet other people with the same interests. And
well, and all right, so there's two parts to that. The first part, when you're talking about the open up gateways, right? The endless possibilities. I think my difficulty with that, something that I've been thinking about for a while, is this feeling you get, the feeling I get when I go to the internet and I feel like there's endless possibilities, and then it's coupled, or there's simultaneously a feeling of almost disappointment and boredom,
right,
where it's like I have endless possibilities and I really don't want to go anywhere. And I feel like the internet creates, especially in creative guys like me and you, creates a sense of lust, right? Like,
right.
Oh, there's endless we could create, we could reach, and it's like everything else. I think I have to be careful to remember that it's like anything else, that it's a tool.
Yes. If we can think of it as a tool instead of as a pleasure delivery device. And so, and that's part of the problem with these major apps that we have. They yield instant, you know, small amounts of a dopamine addiction, you know, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or Google, even all of them have an instantaneous element of satisfying a immediate desire. But if you can think of YouTube, like for instance, you know, when I'm trying to learn more about Python, I found a great little video series by a guy on YouTube, and he's just delivering information. You know, it's not sexy, it's not fun, it's just very rudimentary and helps me understand how to use this. It's a tool. Like YouTube can be a tool. Yeah. And as such, that guy today, for me, supplanted for free, you know, for the 1/1000th of a cent that, you know, my view counted for, or, you know, maybe not that low, but pretty low, like 1/10 of a cent or 100th of a cent that my view counted for him. He's providing me 9 minutes of step-by-step instruction how to use Python. And you think about, like, how would we get that information before 20 years ago? We'd have to go to college and just do the math. I mean, it's 1,000 times the amount of investment in order to get that same 10 minutes. And all the extra, I mean, it's 1,000 times the investment in terms of money, but then the investment in terms of time, place, having to put up with the, you know, bureaucracy of registering yourself in the student, blah, 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 having to listen to the syllabus, all this unnecessary stuff. Like, I can jump right into step one by going to YouTube. So the internet is an incredible tool, but we have been conditioned to think of it as a consumption device. Yeah. And we are complicit in that. But, you know, because it's been easy. But I think in order for us to take it the next step, it's just like you said, we have to think of it as a tool. And so I think that's the first step, is thinking, okay, how can I use it as a tool? You know, we're not going to be perfect. You know, there are apps you can download that'll, like, you know, basically be your taskmaster for you and not let you access a site and stuff like that. I don't know. To me, I feel like that's kind of circumventing the point. Like, let's just make it one step better every day, and eventually, when we get the rush of actually creating things, you know, over time, that will supplant the addiction. Because I've just find in my life that if I remove an addiction from my life, I will replace it with another one. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, okay, and I'm not using Facebook, Twitter, and whatever anymore. I'm going to be using I don't know, I'll just be staring at the wall, or picking up a magazine, or finding some way around it and watching, instead of, I'm not watching the videos on the YouTube app, I'm watching it through the Safari browser, blah, blah, blah. Like, so it's just, I think you really want to find a way to replace that short-term gratification with a more long-term gratification. And that just takes, a little bit of discipline that at first that can yield longer-term discipline.
Yeah.
Because to me, it was exciting today. Like, I started off, I felt daunted, because I'm an idiot child when it comes to computer programming. And just being able to have a couple easy wins today, like, has inspired me to want to try it again tomorrow, So those baby steps in the right direction, they may not be much now, but you think if more of us will do this kind of stuff, so that we're not dependent on a third party, not dependent on a hub or a node in order to disseminate our information, or our vision of the world, we can get a step closer to being gatekeepers for one another. That doesn't cost as much money.
Okay, yeah, well, I agree with that. But just to push back a little bit, I hear quite a bit of disdain in your voice for these hubs and nodes. And what if, is there a different way of could there be a different way of looking at these big sites, in which we start to look at the world or the internet world, so these big hubs and nodes being the supplanters of our post offices and Walmarts? I mean, we never complain. Well, I guess plenty of people complain about Walmart,
right?
But like, where would we be without convenience stores?
Yeah. No, I agree. So the issue is, though, the problem with these hubs and nodes is they've tried to become everything. They've tried to swallow everything and become, and they've actually gone beyond their role. So, like, a lot of people complain about Walmart. I am a fan of Walmart because they know what their role is. Now, their role has expanded beyond what it was 30 years ago, and they've become the be-all, end-all for shopping in a certain place. And that has put tons of people out of business, but it's also hired a ton of people, and in hopefully short-term jobs that they can work their way out of, like interim jobs. Like, that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
For those kind of jobs. Now, they have put a lot of things out of business, but those businesses weren't efficient. Walmart is one of the most efficient enterprises in the history of the world. I mean,
couldn't you say the same thing about Google?
Well, I'll get there, but what, Walmart, they're not offering law degrees, in Walmart. They know their role to a degree. Like, they have walls, they have a limit. They have reached basically their ceiling of what they're capable of doing. And so they're not trying to supplant insurance companies, or, they're not getting out of field. And what Google has done is, rather than stopping at being a search engine, they have turned themselves into this alphabet of corporation, that has diversified so much now that they have let their power get to their head. And again, there's Google, its primary function was to be a search engine for people to get information on the web. And you and I have already talked about how that is compromised. It's not the same anymore. Where they have become gatekeepers of information. They're editorializing your searches. This has been proven anecdotally for me in times where it's just, I'm searching for something, I know it was there. And even if it's not there anymore, there is this thing called the Internet Archive that Google, you could access, but you're not doing that because that's not going to make you money. So,
but do we begrudge them doing that? I mean,
yes, I begrudge them doing that, because it's a bait and switch tactic. They're acting like they're a search engine, and they've become a news site. And so, when people say, "Oh, well, it's just capitalism in action," no, it's not. It's corporatism in action. It's short-term greed in action, masquerading as capitalism, which so much of, the history of our economic in the last 150 years has been people saying, "Oh yeah, look what all the bad capitalists have done." No, they're corporate fascists. They're in bed with politicians. They're lobbyists. Like, that's not capitalism as such. So quit calling it that. Like, so yeah, I'm definitely more on the voluntarist side of things. Someone who believes that people don't need a law to tell them to be to do the right thing in every circumstance. So we don't need these very complicated legalistic laws that are 500 pages long to tell people to do something that is simple. And we have gotten into this culture that is so intertwined with all this, the machinations of law and legality and power and finance, that they're all intertwined, and trying to navigate that stuff requires like a person in each area of expertise, and so that restricts competition, and it restricts our ability to connect with one another. And so really the internet is, whatever its initial intention, the internet, its purpose is to get around all that stuff so people can actually peer-to-peer do business, exchange information, be an editor to one another without having to go through all this thing. And Google has insinuated itself into the middle of that. It used to be a way for people to meet one another.
Right.
Now it's becoming a way for you to meet a giant corporation that has bought their way into that, exchange of information.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, just you look at some of their the things that they've had to do because they're trying to keep a good face for big companies, and they're trying to keep a good face to governments, that they've had to compromise on that first governing principle, which was don't be evil. And they're evil on the sliding scale of evil. I'm not saying Google is the British East India Company here. Okay. I'm not saying, I think that they are a step up from that.
Who's the British East? Who's that?
Oh, well, they were, the corporo-fascist arm of England's empire, that that enslaved, enslaved maybe a rough term, but I mean, they did take out the agency of a lot of people in India, and benefited from that. I mean, you look at the Opium Wars with China, like there's a bad history there, and they were a company that had the King's Charter, so they could do these business deals, and it was hard to tell if you look at it, like. As far as, if you want to call it fascism, I think it is an example of fascism. As far as fascism goes, not as bad as Nazi Germany,
right?
Not as bad as Mussolini here, but not good, not what we want to be, not a free market, not capitalism. And I think, so is Google better than that? Yes, but they are not evil in that sense. I think honestly that Walmart is better than Google in terms of actually providing legitimate service and actually doing what their business model says that they're supposed to do. I think they're actually closer to being a capitalist enterprise. And they've navigated that, that very tenuous world of legality and finance and, the Federal Reserve, all these things like that have kind of made it a muddy waters and the minefield. But, I think Walmart is actually a better corporation than Google.
Well, I think someone who'd really agree with you as far as the evils of Google, and who actually coined the term the democratization of the internet, Matt Mullenweg, the founder of WordPress. What are your feelings on WordPress?
Well, I think, again, it kind of just, you look at WordPress and Wix and Weebly and, all these kind of, I guess, frameworks, or prefabricated ways of building websites. WordPress, I think, has more customizability than some of these, but they do kind of, I don't know, they kind of make people think that there's only one way to build a website. And so then we end up with this sort of, it kind of feels like supermarkets, or it's not supermarkets. What am I trying to think? Shopping centers. Like, when we were growing up, you had the shopping centers, right? Those little strip malls. And whatever strip mall you were at, no matter where you are in the United States, you're the same one. It's just like, oh, I entered strip mall world. Or, if you go into a mall, it's like wherever you are in the world, if you're in a mall, you're in a mall. I mean, some of the stores are gonna be different, you're gonna have some different cuisine, but it's a mall, like you're in Bangkok, but you're in the mall. So I feel like that with WordPress, it's actually even less customizable than the mall template. And so it feels like, the internet and not really WordPress's fault, but it's just people's not think of the internet as the end, but as the means. You know, there's always some other goal. They're not thinking about the internet as the main event, as
Right.
the yeah, what do you call it? When a premiere, you know, when a film is showing, like it's a big event, right? Like nobody's really thinking of websites as that. They're just thinking of them as a means to some other end. And you know, like
isn't that okay? I mean, I don't think that my hammer is the main event, you know?
Yeah. I think that there's more possibility there that's unmined. So I'm not saying that all the internet has to move away from that in toto. I'm saying that there is room there to develop art forms that have never been capable of existing before, but we keep copying. You know, the blog is the copy of the newspaper. YouTube is the copy, you know, dumbed down of the film. Like there are other ways of exchanging information that doesn't necessarily have to look like anything that's come before.
Right. Well, I think the problem though is that it is a utility, and that that as the masses now, and there's something to be said about the evils of how the masses function, but humans in general have certain tendencies, and you know, scientifically it's been, you know, there's scientific words, I can't remember what it's called, but where people just naturally their eyes go to a certain place. They want familiarity.
Yeah, and that's true, but also, you know, I feel like we get into these ruts where a tradition has been established for a while, and we think that is the water in which we swim. And that all water has to look like that from henceforth for forever. But the stupidity of that is like, well, print didn't even exist 800 years ago. People still survived, you know? Yeah. The banking system didn't exist 800 years ago. People still survived. Yeah. So houses didn't exist in the same way 2,000 years ago. People still survived. So just because a technology has market dominance right now, or a culture or a subculture or a way of doing trade exists, you know, that doesn't mean that it is immutable. And so when a technology comes along that says, hey, we're going to try something different with this, and people are like, well, no, you can't do that because you know, movies work this way, or because the print works this way. Like, well, why? It's only because we've gotten used to it. That doesn't mean that it is a law written in the heavens. And so, you know, I've got a list of some. I'll send them to you, a list of some of the, and you even mentioned the Worms one website, the little video game.
Wormex, IO.
Yeah,
all those IO games. All those IO games.
Yeah. But I got a little list here of websites that I think, and I'd love to hear from the audience, any that they think of that just kind of like turn the web on its head, the expected web on its head. So the first one that I think of is homestarrunner.com. It was a Flash website. Again, you know, we think in terms of not the optimal way to design a website, but for the time, and this is in the mid 2000s, homestarrunner.com was just basically a cartoon, and it was interactive, and it opened up storytelling possibilities for kids and they communicated with kids and, you know, college kids and adults, I feel like, at different levels. And they were funny. And it started off just as a cartoon thing. You know, they had a couple little cartoons on this website, and then somebody wrote an email to one of the characters. And so they started a whole series of cartoons in which the character responded to these emails. So this was a whole new format of storytelling. Just think about what that evolution is. This is interactive storytelling. That someone is, you know, a kid misspelling stuff is getting responded to by a cartoon character. And it was very simple format because it's just the guy sitting in front of his computer, you know. So, and you know, he makes fun of their spelling, and that's it. And the whole, I can't remember. I want to say they made 200 of these emails. Let me see. Strong bad emails. Yeah, over 200. I'm not with it right now, but yeah, over 205, 206. I think they did an anniversary one a little while ago. But for over a decade, they maintained the site. And, you it's something, again, unique. It's a different way of doing there's no product placement. There's no advertisement. It's just this organic cartoon storytelling method. And then from that, as far as how did they make money off of it? Well, they started selling swag, started selling shirts and stuff like that, and people bought it. There was no compulsion to do so, whenever I go to these SEO conferences or, growth marketing conferences and stuff like that, like, they're always talking about like, oh, we found that pop-ups when you're about to click up, increase your exchange rate or engagement rate or ROI by blah, blah, blah. And it's like that kind of stuff is just so soul deadening to the internet. It's like, because everybody does the same thing. It's like, here, create an email newsletter, do this. Like, it's just everyone ends up, it's just this herd mentality. And like, that's the snake oil of the internet. Like, all we want to be is snake oil peddling salesmen. If you build it, they will come. I think that really should be the model of the internet. Like, if something is actually worth it, it's going to be found out eventually.
Well, okay, so I agree, but I guess a temptation for me, and I can only speak for me, the temptation for me as a creator is to want to revolutionize the medium. Instead of putting my efforts towards creativity of my own content, I'm afraid,
Right.
like, I've been the last 10 years, I've been obsessed. Well, I guess it hasn't been 10 years yet. But I've been obsessed with trying to find the best way, trying to learn code, trying to learn SEO. In the meantime, I haven't been making any content of my own.
Right.
And I think there's a temptation there, especially for me, to really get bogged down in the construction of the medium, to the revolution, well, not just the creativity, in the building blocks,
Right.
rather. And I think there is a there's a middle ground, of course, like anything else, but it's like going back to that feeling when you you open up the internet, that feeling of that lusty feeling. There's no end to what I can do, what I can build, and who I can contact.
Right. Yeah, and I just think it is a slippery slope, though, when we allow that sort of lizard brain part of us to just take over and either consume, for the the lusty side. I mean, you think about how much internet bandwidth is dedicated to actual lust, not just the lust for knowledge or power, but actual lust. I mean, how much bandwidth is actually wasted on this masturbatory activity? It's absolutely wasting human time. And even just saying that's so controversial for so many people. He's like, oh, you're judging me, you're just a prurient Puritan, blah blah blah, just whatever. Like, we're wasting time. Like, just be real. Like, we could have had web 4.5 by now if we hadn't spent so much time. And I'm complicit in that too, even if I'm not, like you said, even if I'm not engaging in the lustful activity. I'm still engaging in these lustful activities of a different sort, just the search for meaningless, trivial information, Jeopardy-like information that's not going to add anything. I'm not going to add value with it. And then the other side, just that tendency to focus on minors, to focus on the accoutrements of meaning, the accoutrements of story. Like when I was fascinated by film, I would start to get, stuck in like, color correction and, framing and mise en scène and, using all these big terminology to describe, like, can you tell a story? That's fundamental. Like, if you can tell a story, you can start to learn some of that other stuff, or you can get people around you who know that stuff, who are passionate about that stuff. But I mean, I've seen so many YouTube channels over the years that just, they have like a minute-long intro with some custom animation they did, and then what's the rest of their video? Like a vlog, So it's like, oh yeah, you spent so much time on the accoutrements of story, or the accoutrements of meaning. And the internet, I really believe this, and I think PewDiePie's rise to dominance is proof of this. That people are actually interested in content as such. content that's not trying to be content that is the person doing what they love to do and sharing that with somebody else. So like me watching that Python guy today, like I'm not watching him for his inflection. I'm not watching him for his sexiness. I'm not watching him for his editing ability. There's no editing there. Yeah. It's just him sitting there telling me how to use Python. Like it's down to its fundamental. And so, I feel like we have tried to apply old standards. Like, is this person dressed nice? Does their website look, fit with my idea of what reputation should be? Instead of looking at the source, the substance. Does the thing work? Does the app actually work? And, I think that there are examples of websites that have shirked this trend that have been very influential and people don't want to talk about them. Drudge, it's just a collection of links. It's god awful in terms of design. It's terrible. But is it functional? Yes. And has that guy been extremely influential in the last decade? Yes. Regardless of what, I think Drudge is way too, what's the word?
Inflammatory?
Oh, not just inflammatory, but it's gossip columnist. Like, I feel like a lot of his links are just like, why are we reading about this? It's just like, it's newsworthy. Yeah, it's newsworthy in the old, if it bleeds, it leads sense. It's kind of muckraking schlock stuff sometimes. It doesn't feel quite as in your face because there's not titillating pictures every other second, but it can be pretty schlocky at times. And then you look at like 4chan and how influential 4chan has been on the dark web, and as controversial as that site is, again, god awful design but functional. And so I think you and I've had these conversations before about function over aesthetics. That I really think the internet, it needs to go through another wilderness of bad aesthetics, good function. And that's kind of what I want to do on my own personal website, is just try things out. Let's push the limits of bad design to discover new function. And I think there are just another example of that is mspaintadventures.com. And this is one that I didn't really get into. It's a little, younger than me. But this has created its own fandoms. Homestuck is the name of the comic, but it models itself after the kind of old school, message board sort of setup.
Well, Underworld came out of that, and that was like Undertale. Sorry.
Yeah.
Vampires. Although it is vampiric in some ways. I even have my video's not working, but I've got a big old flowy box over here. I think that I think there is the problem for me though is where do we don't pay so much attention to the accoutrements and the flowery titillations of what we're presenting, but where do we still do work to make it appealing? Like, where is that line?
Right. Well, I feel like we end up a lot of these things require more attention, but I just think that we rush to those areas of more attention too soon. Yeah. So an example I think of is Pixar. When they were working on WALL-E, Andrew Stanton, who's, a genius, like the guy's a great storyteller, and, he's had his missteps, but I think he's, one of our better filmmakers of our generation. And there was some disagreement between the programmers, who the way that they had made their virtual cameras in these, CG worlds, and the directors. And the directors were saying there's just something wrong about the focal length or the framing of this lens. It's not fitting up in my mind correctly. And the program's like, no, the math is solid. No, we got it. And so finally what they did is they made life-size replicas of WALL-E, like cut them out with styrofoam or something like that, and put them in an environment, shot them with all these different lenses. And they said, look, here's your computer program. Here's what the actual lenses give us. And well, that's something that, then the programmers look at, you're right. So like a programmer will cave when the information is proven to be wrong, right?
Yeah.
The problem is the marketing world will not cave. The political world will not cave. The economic world that we exist in will not cave, because someone will come in and underwrite it and subsidize it because they like the person, So in the journalism world, it's all words, just become propaganda pieces, tools for convincing people to believe in something. And so, like, the good thing about focusing on function, and you think about code as function, the good thing about focusing on the coder, and trying to convince them rather than have it the other way around, like trying to giving them more primacy of place. It's the same thing for me as giving the screenwriter more primacy of place, right? Like, I'm always thinking about what is really underpinning all of this stuff. We've got all this, like, who's the most important person, the actor or the screenwriter? I'm sorry, I believe the screenwriter is. Yeah. Because they're the ones that are our prophets. Who's more important? The screenwriter, the guy who wrote the short story. Is it Philip K. Dick more important, or is Denis Villeneuve more important? Well, I love Villeneuve, but ultimately, like, he is interpreting Philip K. Dick's vision, when he comes out with Blade Runner 2049. And there is no Blade Runner 2049 without Blade Runner, and there is no Blade Runner without Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. So I'm going to put more, and that guy of all people gets compensated the least of all those people in the totem pole.
Really? I didn't know that.
Like Philip K. Dick. I mean, well, think about it. I mean, Philip K. Dick's short story.
Yeah.
How much money did he get paid for that? And how much royalties did he get paid in the grand scheme of things? I mean, he was dead by the time 2049 came out. He was hardly even alive when Blade Runner came out.
Yeah.
So, like, these people are undervalued. And so I think you have to put the most value on the fundamental. What is the fundamental? And to me, it just seems like whatever's at the base is fundamental, right? Like, whoever is actually writing the code or the script or the story, who's ever getting those base parts. But we tend to elevate the people who have the most flowery presentation.
I agree.
And I mean, that's true on YouTube. I mean, just now, this my buddy Caleb had posted on my website, on Facebook, this Polygon article. YouTube was our biggest disappointment in 2017. It has to be better in 2018. And then they have a still from YouTube's Rewind in which Logan Paul and Jake Paul are facing off.
Oh yeah.
And so he was like, well, what is your thought on this? And so I said, YouTube is dead, and it's not the Paul brothers' fault. They are the symptoms of a much deeper problem with YouTube's ethos. They made the decision long ago to be the internet evolution of teeny bopper magazines, and that is what we've ended up with. They actively ignore anything of substance and ardently support everything that is quote-unquote cool from the perspectives of their boardroom sensibilities. And then Caleb responded, and this was really good. So I'm actually fascinated in this evolution. Green Bros to Fine Bros to Paul Bros, and I'd love to discuss it in more depth. He just summed it up right there. YouTube started off with the Green Bros, the Vlog Bros, the nerds. I mean, these two guys are nerds. You got a writer, nerd fighters. You got a writer. I mean, these guys kind of are they are what you envision when you think of the internet nerd, and or even the programming nerd, even though they're not programming guys. Like they're nerdy and they are geeky, and they've been really influential. But from them, we got who became the next big thing on YouTube, the Fine Bros, and they were not the Vlog Bros at all. They were sensational, and they were reductive, and they were corporate fascist. With their trying to make sure that anybody who uses the React format has to pay them money. Absurd, as if they invented that. And then the Paul Bros, who are, if you took the Disney Channel, like distilled it through Snapchat and Vine, and then put them on, oh man, I don't even know, speed or speed
meth.
Mixed. Like meth mixed
with meth is too ugly, like heroin.
No, it's true. I don't know. It's not a drug. That's the problem. Like they're not that. Like if Fruity Pebbles was a drug, like that's what you get with the Paul Bros,
Yes.
And so they are so asinine and so annoying. But here's the thing. Like, I have, over the course of the last year, I've decided that they're actually geniuses. They really are. They are a symptom of the problem. They are the Donald Trumps of YouTube. They have actually trolled this system so hard and tricked every single person in it to becoming their marketing machine. Like, those two kids are so smart in navigating the space. And the reason, the final straw for me was seeing Logan Paul just last week or 2 weeks ago on Top Chef. He was a guest judge on Top Chef, season 85, and he at the end of it, like, so he commented on a few of the dishes or whatever. At the end of it, someone said, "Yeah, this is cute but unnecessary. This dish." And he's like, kind of like me. And he walked off. And that was his goodbye.
Wow.
He just totally owned himself. And he knew he could do it because of the forum. Like in that world, he could get away with that because he knew his viewership probably wasn't going to be watching. So he could totally just like drop this little bomb. It's kind of like, he might as well have just winked at the camera. Like, I know what I am, bitch. Like he, and then, this last week, the controversy with him and the suicide forest in Japan. I don't know if you read about that one.
Yeah.
But, I tweeted about that. I'm just so frustrated by all this stuff. It's like everyone is like reacting with this self-righteous indignation. Nobody in the world knew about that suicide forest until outside of Japan, until Logan Paul did a video about it. And all of a sudden, this guy, the same thing that everyone in Washington and in the mainstream news does all the time. We're raising awareness about this terrible problem. Well, yeah, in 10 minutes, Logan Paul, with his just terrible way of presenting it, raised more awareness about this problem than all of you did with your millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so he did it in 10 minutes, and he became a laughingstock for it, and he knew he would. He did it on purpose, and he knew that it would be great marketing for his brand too. So he wins doubly, because now you gave him $100,000 worth of marketing by NPR and CNN and everyone else sharing it. So you hate him. It's Barnum, what he said, all publicity is good publicity, right? Yeah. So you are actually helping his brand. And in the meantime, you are totally unaware that he's using the same method you use to promote whatever you do, as if you don't make money when you say, we're going to raise awareness about blank social ill. You write your blog post about it. You're not making money on that. So how is this any different?
Yeah.
He's using the exact same method you used for 100 years, and you want to lay this all at his footstep.
Well, I think, and so that I think is the crux. The Paul brothers, I think right in there is the crux of where the ugly meets success. Because I believe Nigga Higga, even Facebook and Zuckerberg, who else? All the Paul brothers, all these creators, PewDiePie, you mentioned PewDiePie.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they had, if they didn't, they didn't have an aesthetic, of course, they had some aesthetic, right? Was they had dogged focus, and they stayed true. They had an idea and they stayed true to it, and then instead of, they did not give in to the haters, but instead, the detractors, they played the game, so that the detractors played right into their hand.
Right. All of them. They've all been pretty masterful at that. And, so this isn't to try to exonerate the Pauls, but it really is an indictment on the way that we've run media for so long. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Well, he's just taking that and turning it back on you, mainstream media. This is how you make a living. If it bleeds, it leads. Don't lecture me about Logan Paul in this suicide forest. Why don't you lecture yourself about what happened in Cambodia in the killing fields? Go watch the killing fields again and then lecture Logan Paul. Just some self-examination would be great just about now.
Yeah.
This is the problem when journalism becomes artificial celebrity masquerading as moral crusade. It's that's the problem. And see, and I feel like what the internet is, a lot of this stuff that has been ugly all along is going to come to the surface, and people are going to realize how ugly it is because a kid in wearing a stupid hoodie is doing it. It's going to be revealed for what it is, and hopefully people will say, oh, if they could just apply that to the bigger thing, they might be able to keep up with what's coming next, which is hopefully the abolition of our thinking from this sort of group think hysteria where we just chase blood everywhere. you know, and claim to care about life in the process. You know, it's really disgusting. I mean, you see the way that the news reports about any shooting, about any you know, terrorist attack. Everything just becomes a hysterical debate in which it's a gold rush for whoever gets the story first, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just you know, what they're decrying in him is just business as usual in the industry. And I, you know, what one of my goals is to see that if more of us can talk together, like if I can talk to somebody, you know, if there's another Killing Field fiasco, that I can talk to the person on the ground there and say, tell us what's happening. What should we think about this? And then analyze that and say, okay, you know, is this guy free from bias? Like, you know, and try to understand how we can, you know, prevent something like happening here. Or, you know, is there a way to help people in another country in a similar circumstance, you know, start to create their own grassroots ability to prevent that from happening? Like, are there constructive ways for us actually to move forward, as opposed to just gossiping about what world leaders are doing that we have no input on? You know, like, are there ways as citizens that we can prevent soldiers from having to kill one another? You know, so like, and I really feel like that is the power of the internet, is to get, and if you read Philip K. Dick, you know, if you read good storytellers of any kind, they are teasing out these ideas. You know, they're exploring these ideas in the future, hoping that we don't have to be there. You know, you know, hopefully these dystopian visions will help us rewrite the future so that we don't end up there.
Scare us off of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that we can, you know, try to navigate this thing. But the answer is not like this Luddite sort of like, let's just eradicate the internet or eradicate YouTube because look what it brings. It brings Logan Paul. No, no, it's just, that's just the cancer screening showing you that there's some cancer there. Like, the cancer did not start with him. So, you know, hopefully we can get off again. And YouTube is totally complicit in the rise of the Pauls. Like, they never had any, they never shut them down. They now, you know, they've always like appeased them.
Well, I mean, look at YouTube Rewind. They got the most time.
Yeah. They got the most time. They're sitting there. They're going to lecture the world about, you know, whatever. Like, it's just, they're just,
no, I really believe YouTube wants to be, you know, Disney. So that's what, right. And the Pauls are basically the, you know, they're Disney. I don't know. Edgy Disney. No, so going forward, as we make our own myth, as we wrap it up a little bit here, what can we do, me and you know, creative types, capable, you know, one thing that I think me and you have, we have a little bit extra time, you know, we have a little bit extra knowledge about technology and stuff like that. So should we be creating our own servers? What?
Yeah. I think that's a step, you know, like, I'm trying to take this one step at a time so I don't, like, you know, kill my brain. You know, trying to digest the information about Bitcoin is just like overloading my circuitry here. I'm so far behind. And so in order to even catch up marginally with any of this, I'm just starting from the ground up and watching YouTube videos. So, like, what I would say to creative people is, stop taking your art class, stop taking your screenwriting class, stop taking your filmmaking class, and watch YouTube videos. Don't take a coding course. Go watch YouTube videos about a programming language. Learn it. You know, just start basic from that, and then from there, try to learn some networking skills. Try to learn, you know, instead of me spending more money on a gaming computer next year, like, set up my own server. Like, you know, start small, but actually invest, you know, this time and this money that I have in creating ways to connect with one another, so that we are not beholden to the person reading a screenplay and saying, you know, this screenplay is good, but I don't want to make it into a movie because it's too risky. You know, like, you can't trust those people. Like, I mean, look what Hollywood is right now. It is as safe as it's been in 20 years. They're not taking risks. They're banking on everything that's making money, and they're making money hand over fist.
But I would say, on top of that, though, we have to also just, like, to moderate that a little bit, I would say we have to be careful to not get bogged down in the reads, so that we're not spending the next, 5 to 10 years learning and consuming, right? Instead of creating. Like there's got to be a balance where we're creating and we're learning, and there's a feedback loop in there somewhere.
Well, that's why I think you want to, and that's why I'm doing as much as I can with my website as I'm going. So, like my first start is just this silly, stupid Hello World, landing page. Like that's it. But the point of it being that, some of what I've written, rather than try to post it on a blog somewhere else, and rather than give that to WordPress, rather than give that to Facebook, rather than give that to Reddit, I'm going to put it on my website, and so that people can read my short stories there. People read my screenplays there. Maybe I make some custom videos that I don't post to YouTube, that I post them, in the source. Maybe it's hidden in the source code, or maybe it's a video in the actual page. Then even that is a task, like learning how to do that. Like how am I going to encode it? How am I going to make it small enough? Like these are questions that, YouTube has made easy. Like they've answered that question. Oh, it's H.264 MP4. I'll upload whatever. We don't care. Like we'll encode it on the back end. Like, so a lot of these things, we've become so addicted to having these intermediaries.
Yeah.
And the point of the internet is to take out the middleman. So if we can learn, even if we just get a smattering of it, again, I'm not shooting to make Facebook here. I'm shooting to make something better than Drudge Report. I think I can do that. Almost now, I think I can make something better than Drudge Report. So like, let's start small and work our way up. Another website I did want to mention is Nicky Case's website, incase.me. And there's a specific one he mentions, incase.itch.io/wbwwb. I guess we'll put that in the show notes or whatever.
www.
No, it's too long to actually say it out loud.
Okay.
But, so Nicky Case's thing, it's a great he has a bunch of games on his main page.
Yeah.
And when you just look at the design of his main page, it's great. It's different than what you see. And it's very user-friendly. He has a way better design eye than I do. But when you go to this game in particular, it's we become what we behold. So that's where the WBWB comes from. We become what we behold, and it's a criticism of media. And it's this little playable 5-minute video game. Again, there's no market for a 5-minute playable video game 20 years ago. There was no market for it 15 years ago, no market for it 10 years ago. There's hardly a market for it now, because we're all going, to play apps that we download or whatever. Like this little thing, like I played it, and in 5 minutes, I was like, afterwards, I'm paying for this now. I paid the guy $5 for 5 minutes. I paid him $5 because I was just like, I was that impressed with the message of the game. And in this tiny little 5-minute thing had created an art form that YouTube, that film, that TV could not convey. He created a medium for his message that fit the message. Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message, right? Well, we have gotten into, again, this consumptive internet where when we keep posting stuff on these other mediums, we are aiding their message, which is centralization.
But one final plea for WordPress.
Right.
I'm not talking about WordPress.com, where it's completely controlled. It's basically the same thing as Blogger or
right.
Medium or whatever. But WordPress.org, where you can, it's open source, and you can put you host your own files. You manipulate your own code on these files, but it just gives you a framework so that you don't have to learn PHP. You don't have to learn, spend hours and hours developing all this framework, just skeletons to post your content on. And also the last thing was that it has a community surrounding it where people are working together, WordCamps, and just anywhere you go on YouTube, anywhere on the net, are people working together for free, giving advice for free, talking to each other, working together to learn how to do it better, and democratizing the internet.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I guess my problem is, though, that, again, it's kind of an imported attitude from previous things. Like, why depend on frameworks or modules, which is so much how the internet works right now, when you can learn to do it yourself, if you have the capability. Now, not everybody has a capability. I understand that, but I think we underestimate just how easy some of this stuff is because we've been indoctrinated to thinking that you need to be a calculus master in order to do any sort of programming. Most of it is high school level math. It's just thinking in terms of logic problems. Most of it is kind of game theory, you know. So like there are games, we spend so much time on board games and video games, all this stuff. Like apply some of that effort in learning how this stuff works, because this is where we're connecting as a society. And the more that we can learn about, even if we don't get to the point where we're you know, coding some master website or something like that from scratch, the more it makes us more able to use some of these other tools anyway. So I feel like it's a no-lose situation.
Oh, no, I totally agree.
And, you know, something like WordPress, I feel like it can be a stepping stone, but the more you can do, the better it's going to be, you know, for everybody. The more that we can you know, again, peer-to-peer, like if somebody in 1999 was saying, well, you know, I'm an old person, I can't learn anything better than the AOL. Well, you know, like you're restricting yourself to understand what the web can be, the possibilities that are out there outside of AOL's little, you know, gated community. And there are possibilities outside the YouTube gated community and the WordPress gated community and the Facebook gated community.
So I see what you're saying. So there's like this, I've felt this before where I look back and our forefathers knew 7 languages and have read all these, you know, the great works.
Yes.
And you're saying when it comes to the internet, why are we, you know, just reading Twilight, you know, like
why are we underperforming with the most of information at our fingertips we've ever had in the history of the world? Like we should all be Renaissance men and women at this point. Like,
but what if the reason is because, and I think this could be a possibility with my experience, this could be a possibility because you learn the language and then you realize you've spent so much time learning the language, there's nobody to talk to. And what you're building with it, you know, it's a dead language that what you're building with it is obsolete. And you have to learn a new language, and you have to learn
concepts apply in computer languages easier than they do. Like it would be the concept of dialects. You know, when you're learning a language in India, if you learn Hindi, that's going to translate somewhat, roughly, somewhat, at least the script in Punjabi and Gujarati and Marathi. Like there's once you get and the grammatical structure, they're going to somewhat, you know, go back and forth between each other. Like it'll give you a leg up when you're learning something new. Now, if you learn Hindi and then try to learn a South Indian language, you're starting from total scratch. It's like a totally different thing. But, you know, if you learn English and then you're trying to speak to someone who's from Scotland, you're going to be able to understand a lot of what they're saying. You may need to learn some new verbiage and some new like slang terms and some accents. You know, it's going to be different. But I feel like when you learn the little bit I've done with HTML and Python and Ruby, some of this stuff translates like, you know, like I don't even know the function, but x equals x plus 1. Like I remembered it from some other language and I tried it in Python this morning and it worked. So like there are things that kind of interconnect. And so the concepts, the underlying, you know, the underlying logic problem of computer science can apply across things. And so for me, I'm just saying, let's learn how to build houses here, not just learn how to go to malls. You know, like let's learn how to build. Maybe you don't get the whole part of building the house. Maybe you are only good at writing the plans. You know, maybe you're only good at laying the brick. But let's get some part of that stack in our head so that when people are throwing a bunch of techno jargon BS, there's so many people in this industry, in the tech industry, that have no idea how to code themselves. Like when you see them actually code, it's like some ASCII Christmas tree or something. Like, oh yeah, they know how to do the correct grammar structure or whatever, syntax. But then when you see what they actually output, it has no discernible use whatsoever. But they can throw around the jargon and they end up making millions, just like basically just leading people around pretending to know what they're talking about.
So like it reminds me of prefab houses. You're like, realtors selling prefab houses.
Yeah, I mean, and there's just so much of that going on. Like the more articulate, even if we don't become Renaissance men or women, even if we just can just understand, you know, like not a jack of all trades, but a 7 of all trades, or you know, a 7 here, a 3 there, a 4 there, a 10 here. Like eventually you're going to be able to have better conversations about this stuff and be able to understand when you're being hoodwinked, being able to understand where you're being taken for a ride. And I feel like we have been psyoped, like not like it's some government conspiracy, but like it's a corporate conspiracy to get us just to buy, just get us to just consume. Even when we're not spending money, we are spending time, and we are just spending that time like it's cash on fire.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to land. We do not want to spend money like it's cash on fire, or whatever you just said.
Or whatever. Yeah. My gift for analogy is, it goes up and down.
No, it's always these are always great conversations, and I feel like I have a renewed inspiration because I have been really frustrated by it. Just takes so much time. And I am, like I've told you before, I can't stand going through code. I'm not a language guy. I don't, I hate learning new languages. I like speaking them. I am a relational guy. I like talking to people.
Right.
But I've never been good at grammar, spelling, and this is the kind of mentality you have to have when you go through code and you look for bugs and so but as we often say on this podcast, work is the righteousness, is the goodness, is the pleasure, the real pleasure and happiness of life. And
especially when it's done well, and we can stand back and cross your arms and say, that's it. May not be the best thing out there, but it's original.
Yes, and I did the work. I feel good about just there's something in the work itself,
right,
and not using somebody else's. So I appreciate the conversation. Good points. And speaking of which, we do well. I guess you're working on your website, right? As it is, we'll give that link out soon, right?
Yeah. We can put it out. We'll put the whole link, to all the websites that have been mentioned in the notes. If that's cool. And I'll include mine in there. Such as it is, it's terrible, but
I like it. It's got a little look everywhere. It's not one dimensional.
Right, yeah.
It's 1.5 dimensional.
It's 1.001 dimensional.
Ooh. Yeah. Oh man. Well, thanks again for the good conversation. Let's go forward making our own myth.
Let's do it.
All right. Have a good one, man.